Hello, everyone. The last time I was on a stage in this room, I was actually getting married. So it's a little bit of a trip to see a bunch of suits, but it's so nice to be here. It is so nice to be here with all of you. Good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Salima Raji. I am the chair of the ULI Toronto District Council. I'm also president and CEO of the York University Development Corporation. I am pleased to introduce our event this evening, Fireside Chat 2025 with Rail Diamond. As a Toronto region-based organization, we acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we at ULI Toronto value the great relationship that has been developed with the Chief and Council of this First Nation. Importantly, I am pleased to announce that in early April, ULI Toronto and our Truth and Reconciliation partner, Shared Path, will be releasing what we believe to be Canada's first Truth and Reconciliation Guide for real estate and development professionals. Please stay tuned. As we near the end of Black History Month, we'd like to also acknowledge and honor those that came here involuntarily, particularly descendants of those who were brought here through enslavement. Over many years, ULI Toronto has developed an online resource page with rich information relating to DEI, specifically Black history and truth and reconciliation as it relates to our industry, pardon me. So we're going to talk about our amazing sponsors for a moment, because nothing we do can happen without our annual sponsors. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing us to do the work that we do at ULI Toronto, to be able to service the industry the way that we do. Thank you so much more. Now, more than ever, we rely on our sponsors to put on the programs that we do, to drive our mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. Thank you. More specifically to this evening, our Fireside Chat 2025 would also not be possible in this new venue without our sponsors tonight: Airden Barrellis, Crozier, Daniels, Hariri Pontaneri Architects, and NAC Designs, and of course our presenting sponsor, Deloitte. Thank you all for supporting ULI Toronto and in this very special annual event tonight. So for today's program, our Fireside Chat with Rail Diamond, veteran attendees of this event will know that this evening's stage is reserved for senior real estate professionals who have succeeded not just in business, measured by shareholder returns, but those that also act as civic leaders who champion the many critical city building frontiers that make our city and urban region great. There is much to be said on this point, but I will leave it to our next speaker, and of course the Fireside Chat led by Choice Properties, Orit Sarafati, Vice President, Sustainability and Placemaking. Before I invite Deloitte's national leader and investment management and real estate sectors, Tony Kakuzo, to make the formal introduction, just a quick note on the program. We always have audience Q&A, which will be facilitated through our Mentimeter portal that many of you will be familiar with. So please scan the QR code. It will take you there. And our executive director at ULI Toronto, Richard Joy, will relay as many of those questions as we have time for. So please do send them in. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tony.
For those who are confused, that is me on the screen. I should replace it, but now I'm going to ride that until I retire. I'm not changing it. A couple quick remarks on Rail. His career in the real estate sector spans pivotal roles at Choice, Crete, and Brookfield. And I noticed from his bio, conspicuously absent is his time at Deloitte, but I won't hold that against him. Rail brings a wealth of experience in corporate strategy, finance and operations, ESG practices, and building a strong culture. During Rail's tenure, Choice has introduced mixed-use and residential assets to its portfolio of commercial, retail, and industrial properties. He successfully advocated for Choice's adoption of a net zero emissions goal by 2050 and a robust social impact framework focused on strengthening communities where Choice operates and develops. Choice Properties has grown to become Canada's largest REIT, managing over 700 properties with an enterprise value of over $16 billion. On a more personal note, for those who've known Rail for any period of time, his accomplishments come as no surprise. He's usually the smartest person in the room, but you wouldn't always know it because he's definitely always the most humble, which probably means that congratulations to ULI that you actually convinced him to do something where the event is solely focused on him. Rail's talents are only surpassed by his integrity, and I personally never walk away from a conversation with him without learning something. So without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Orit Sarfati, Vice President, Sustainability and Placemaking at Choice, and of course our fireside chat guest, Rail Diamond, President and CEO of Choice.
So, Rail, be honest with us. Speaking about yourself in front of 250 people, not your favorite pastime.
No. Look, we didn't even make it on the top 20 items that I wanted to do this evening. And Tony, it's funny you say, ULI emailed myself and Orit asking us to do this, and my immediate reaction was, like, don't love speaking. Happy to speak about Choice anytime. And I actually believed that this was a presentation about Choice. Orit kept saying to me, we should do this. This is good. This is good for Choice profile. This is good for your profile. We should do this. So I said to Orit, sure, I'm happy to do this. But not knowing what I actually agreed to do. And then the email came by and I opened up this ULI email and I was like, oh my God, what did I agree to? So hopefully for those of you who came, we don't disappoint and really appreciate the support. But that is the honest truth, how we got you this evening.
And so you mentioned that we're here also on behalf of Choice. So this is when you give the spiel.
Okay, so given I actually believe we're doing an IR pitch, my elevator pitch on Choice is we own phenomenal grocery anchored retail. We own a great portfolio of industrial properties. We own and are building a high quality portfolio of purpose-built rental. We have a very strong balance sheet and some phenomenal people who some of them have come to support me today. So thank you.
Well, that's great. I can't wait to get started. I guess everyone now knows, if you didn't before, that Rail is not from around here. Rail, how did you make it to Canada? Tell us your story.
So when I was about 18, my parents said, look, given the climate in South Africa, we are emigrating and we want you and your brother to go ahead and we're going to follow shortly thereafter. So my brother left in 94, I came in 95. And unfortunately, my mother got ill and passed away about 2 years later. I'm fortunate today that all of my family live in Toronto. But I would say the one, key thing that I took away from that experience, so if you think about coming when you're 18 years old to an environment that you don't know the sports, you have no friends. I pretended I knew what was going on in hockey back then when I used to go to bars and watch it, but you don't know the sports, you don't have a lot of friends. Unfortunately, your mother's ill, so I don't have a great, initial experience in Canada. But I think you when I look back at it now, it taught me that, firstly, I have to do things for myself, and it taught me, resiliency, and so essentially, my wife would often say to me, look, you hate relying on people for things. And I remind her, well, remember, I came here when I was 18 and I really had to learn the culture and the environment, everything on my own. So,
I think that we're going to find out later on, one of your key traits is collaboration. So balancing that with this sort of self-reliance is, I think, noteworthy. So here you are, you're in Canada, and we find out that you didn't come to do real estate. You're not from these generations of real estate families. You started out as an accountant.
So it's a good thing, an accountant. Look, Deloitte sponsored here today, so that's accounting is a good thing. Look, growing up, I always knew I wanted to do something in business, and to me, accounting in South Africa, and Jackie Hopping from Deloitte is here and knows very well, accounting in South Africa is a great way to get a general business degree. So I always had this vision. I want to be an accountant and then move into business. I was very fortunate that my first real job was at Deloitte Intuition. Actually, Tony Concuso ultimately became my first manager, and he did look like that back then. He was a manager, and I'm going to try to use a profile picture from 20 years ago too. But the first job, came to Deloitte, and you're doing audit, and, you think of Deloitte's largest clients, it's like the Royal Bank of Canada. It's this prestigious Canadian, iconic company. And I thought, God, I have to go audit. Sorry, everyone hear me okay? I have to go audit, the banks or the financial institutions. So when they sign you up, you say, which group do you want to be in? And I was like, I want to be in financial institutions. And back then, we didn't have computers, but you go to like a scheduling board and they'll tell you what job you're on. And the first job I'm on is a funeral home. And I was like, what? Like, this is not a financial institution. And what I didn't know back then was, funeral homes sell lots of plots and they have lots of cash. So they actually were in the financial institution group. But I went to the scheduling manager and said, look, my mother just passed away. Like, I really don't want to do a funeral home. And he said, well, we have the worst job in the office because it's long hours, not because it was a bad client, and it's a real estate client, so we can switch you out of financial institutions into real estate. So truthfully, it was, honestly lucky, because I really fell in love with, ultimately fell in love with real estate. But for me, initially, it was just a stream of cash flows, and it was so easy to understand. So that is how I landed up in real estate. It was really lucky.
We have kids about the same age, and kids as young as 16 kind of pressured to take this line all the way through to retirement. And you're an example of someone who didn't start out in real estate, who actually made a pivot. What do you advise your child?
So, it's funny you say that, because my son at the moment is busy going through what does he want to do, and he has to drop sciences and he has to drop this, and he has no idea what he wants to do, and he's picking which courses am I good at, and therefore those are the ones that he's focused on. So he's decided he's doing something business. What he's doing, he has no idea. But I think, when I look back, and I even think of some of the people, like I don't know if Niall Collins is here, head of our development team. He is here, good. Okay. But Niall's background's not actually in development. Niall was an evaluator at one point, and some of the best developers like Niall that I can think of, lawyers, and so it doesn't necessarily matter what you started doing. I think it's just, how do you get a base understanding or foundation that you can then apply into something that you're more passionate about. So I told my son, just figure it out. Just get into a program you think you want to do, and then explore it.
No matter what job we have, right at the beginning, we learn lessons that carry us through from industry to industry. Is there a lesson that you may have learned hard way early on?
So, I was fortunate at Deloitte. So I was in the real estate audit group, and I realized that I wasn't a great auditor, and I wanted to do corporate finance. And I used to work for an individual who Jackie, sitting in the front, worked for as well. His name was Seymour Temkin. His name is Seymour Temkin, and Seymour would model REITs, and I would essentially follow Seymour around modeling REITs, and I would do all the modeling for Seymour. He would do the presentations, and they put me in the corporate finance group. And one of the jobs I was assigned to in the corporate finance group was we had to build a model or check the financial integrity of a model for a bank. And they would essentially have investors, they would give the investors return. And, but I kept saying to my boss, there's something's broken in the system. You put $100 in, you pay $6 of interest, you cannot give the investors, a return that they expect to get. And he kept saying, but our job is not to advise on, does this model work? Our job is to say, we've checked the computations. And I kept saying, but something's wrong in this thing. And it was the day before Christmas. I think I was one of the few people in the office, and the client phones frantically to say, we need a letter signed by Deloitte that says you have done exactly what we had done, the financial computations of the model. And I phoned my boss at the time. It was not Tony. No one from Deloitte said it was the individual. And I signed this letter as Deloitte, as I was told. And, the client couldn't raise money off this model. It was clear that it was broken. They couldn't raise money off the model. So they came and they seeked their fees back from Deloitte that they had paid. And they ended up, I think, threatening a lawsuit or did suing. And I was called into this office of the senior partner who was on the litigation side. And the first thing he says, who signed this letter? And I said, woof, it was me. And, he was like, why would you sign this letter? But I think it taught me that, look, if something doesn't feel right, clearly you have to speak up. And the same thing, speak up, ask questions. And look, it was probably very junior in my career to say I was doing what I was told, but really it just made no sense. And, you think about it, and this was not financial fraud, but you think about all the frauds and everything happens like last minute, it's always a rush. You always have to say to yourself, why on the day before Christmas do you need a letter from, but look, so it was a big lesson for me, and thank God Deloitte never fired me.
I mean, you did what you were supposed to do, but here you had an opportunity to add value even beyond that.
Orit, you're very wise. You're right. I think the other lesson is that you should try and always add value to your manager, your boss, to say, look, here's a computation or an analysis, but this is what I think about it and how you should, view this analysis versus just doing what you're told.
And maybe you shouldn't be at work on Christmas.
Day before Christmas.
Day before Christmas. Okay, so you have now made it into the real estate sector and you transition into Brookfield. You move around, yeah? Canada wasn't your only residence.
Yeah, so look, Brookfield was the most spectacular training ground because the harder you worked, the more you put your head down, the more they would throw at you, and then you worked harder and they would throw more at you. And, we had the opportunity to live in New York for 4 years. I lived in Australia for about 6 months on Brookfield properties, on transactions where they bought other public companies. So great training ground. So what brought us back to Toronto was, my wife is South African too. And as I said, my family has generally moved, or most of my family now live in Toronto. My wife's family lived in Toronto. We had 2 young kids, and we were just having, a hard time picking, do we pick a city or do we pick family? And my wife is a very smart lady, and she's like, I want my kids to grow up with their grandparents. And so we picked a city, and I was very fortunate to get a job at Crete as the chief financial officer. So I came back to Toronto.
Okay, so I'm following. So Crete transforms into Choice. So tell us about that.
So it wasn't transformation. Essentially, Choice bought Crete in 2018. So I joined Crete in 2012, but in 2018, Choice purchased Crete.
And it was a merger.
Well, we pitched it as a merger, but it was a true acquisition. But what was unique about the acquisition is that many of the senior management team, including myself at Crete, actually stayed on to be the senior management team of the combined entity.
So I've been part of a merger, or call it what you will, and it is notorious for what it does to culture, for what it does to an organization that is trying to find its ground, even as the ground is moving. How did you guys get through that?
So, I was fortunate at Brookfield. I'd seen, many takeovers of other public companies. And if I think back, there were some very smooth integrations and some not so smooth. And I would say the acquisition of Crete was on the not so smooth side. And it was purely a function of lack of communication. So Choice purchased Crete in 2018. And I blame myself as well as, other members of our team that, people wanted to know, what is my future? What is my job? What is the strategy? Which department is that? And we took too long to give clarity. And what happens when you take too long to give clarity on what someone's role is, people start assuming. And they assume the worst. They assume maybe I don't have a job because no one's communicated to me. And then they quit. And then so it fuels this negativity. I took over as CEO in 2019, and the first thing we did an engagement survey. And 50% of our colleagues in 2019 said, that Choice is a good place to work. The truth is that I bet you it was a lot lower, because of those 50%, I'm sure many were scared to be honest. And so the first thing we did is said, look, we made a mistake on the integration. We had, at this point, communicated what the vision of Choice was. We're in the process of rehiring teams where we had lost people. And we said, we will commit to, I don't want to say over-communicate, but do appropriate amount of communication. And we created this, I remember this pyramid I put up for people. I said, every single person in an organization is entitled to, at minimum, 2 meetings a week. One is a department meeting, and the other one is a meeting with your manager one-on-one. And we will make sure that, we almost over-communicate. And, we're very proud of the culture today. So today, approximately 90% of colleagues say that Choice is a good place to work. And it's probably, when I think back, Orit, on the merger, for the single biggest thing that I'm proud of.
Did you always have open work plans? When I joined, I was surprised that there were no walls besides meeting rooms.
So I would say it was something that I saw at Brookfield that I really loved, that everyone sat in the open. Everyone, it really fostered an environment of open communication. So at Crete, we had done it. And then I think it took us about 1.5 years or 2 years after the merger to redo, or after the acquisition, I called it a merger, after the acquisition to redo the office. But yeah, we made it completely open where everyone, we want people to be able to walk up to someone's desk and ask a question, not this, someone has an office.
Very often. Absolutely.
Can I give my plug on office quickly? Or is that coming later, or is?
How do you feel about people coming into the office?
Look, I thought you were going to ask me about my future of office, which even though one of the things we did in the last 6 years is we actually decided to exit office as an asset class. And we exited office as an asset class, not because we didn't believe in office. We exited it because when we looked at our portfolio, we said, we want deep platforms. And why do we want deep platforms? Is we can hire the best people then. We can give people good career growth in those platforms. So when we looked at our business, we said on retail, we own more grocery-anchored retail than anyone else. And therefore, we can have the best platform. On industrial, I'm looking to see if Lauren is here. There's Drew. But on industrial, the same thing. Like, we have $4.5 billion of industrial. We have a big pipeline. Again, we can build a very, large industrial business and therefore hire great talent. The same thing on purpose-built rental. We own so much land that over time we will intensify. And the same thing, we'll build up very deep platform in multifamily. We didn't see the same path on office, and that's why we exited it. But,
How do you feel about people doing that?
So I was getting there. I believe that in order to really advance in your career, you have to learn from your colleagues and interact with your colleagues. And I don't believe you can form relationships through a Zoom call and a Teams call. You can form a relationship. You can just not form the same level of relationship that you can through, being around colleagues. And so that's why I'm more of a proponent to have people in more. But look, I will recognize that in order to attract the best talent, we have to offer that flexibility. But I think my preference is interacting with others in the office.
You're not subtle about it. Let's talk about Choice as a business. Even with all the fluctuations that we're seeing, Choice has remained strong. It's a robust company. Investors are telling you that. Is there an approach that you can credit?
So look, as a management team, and this is not me, this is the team. As a management team, the two most important things we can do is we have to own good real estate and we have to have a strong balance sheet. And so on the balance sheet side, you can think of the best real estate in the world. And if you capitalize it incorrectly, i.e. with too much debt, there's a period that will happen that you may not be able to hold on to that asset. And I'll give you an example. So an example would be, we're not far from First Canadian Place, and the Reichmans had, O&Y, and they built Olympia, New York, and it is some of the best office properties in the world, but they couldn't hold on to that real estate because they had, all short-term floating rate debt. And you could have the worst piece of land, but you have no debt on it, and you'll be able to hold on to it forever. And that is why we think balance sheet management is so important. And when we say balance sheet management, we think about having low leverage, and then we think about making sure that not more than 10% of our debt comes due at any point in time. And that, in combination with having great real estate, we believe, you'll be able to deliver superior returns, and Choice has definitely done that.
So Choice is impressive to investors, and Choice has made a really ambitious commitment to sustainability. Maybe with the headwinds that we're facing now, you might be asked, are you still committed to sustainability? I wonder if you would share what your views are and why Choice has reaffirmed its commitment.
So look, we in the business of owning our real estate for the long term. And so you have to start with, we in the business for owning it for the long term. The next thing I'd say is that we have a major shareholder who's very focused on the long term. That's George Weston Group and the Weston family. And then you say, what's going on in the world? And none of us can deny the effect climate change is having. If you just think about this year, think about the fires in LA, think about the fires in Jasper in the summer. And so climate change is having an impact. And so we, as a long-term owner, have to do our part in ensuring that we're not emitting, additional greenhouse gases into the environment. And that is why we felt so strongly about it. But so that's the main reason. The second reason is we truly believe, or I truly believe, it makes good business sense. And I can see some members of our ESG team here. And I'll tell you just two stories which prove it. So I'll tell you a third one, Arit. So the first is, we built an industrial building in 2013 or 14. And I remember speaking to our development partner and saying, we should put in LED lighting. And he said, are you crazy? We're not putting in LED lighting. It costs us $600,000 and the tenant won't pay for it and the returns are lower. So we put in whatever, I forget what lighting we put in. I think it was called T5 lighting. And we've just renewed their tenant. It's Kimberly-Clark. And they demanded that as part of that renewal, we update the lighting to LED lighting. And the lights would have lasted a lot longer than, call it the 6 years the tenant has been there. So clearly tenants are starting to demand it. The second thing is, we've been on this path to figure out how do we improve the energy performance of our assets. And we've realized that, look, on a typical industrial or retail building, the thing that emits the gas is the rooftop unit, the heating unit. And so we've been on this path to put in dual-fired units. And we go back 3 years ago, you couldn't even buy them. And then a year and a half ago, everyone was saying, well, they're so much more expensive than just gas units. And recently, the individual who does, our construction estimation was telling me that today they're the exact same cost as a gas unit. And I bet you if we fast forward 5 years' time, we won't even be able to buy just that gas unit. And so that would be the second story. And the third story is, as I was sitting here, and I'm not saying there is asbestos in this space, but if you just think about insulation, like everyone used asbestos or insulation contained asbestos. No one, you fast forward today, so you just have to say, think about how the building materials and the technology will change that will enable this. So we have to try and keep pushing forward because we believe it's the right thing, but we believe it makes good business sense because we will get rewarded from it through tenants demanding it.
And the technology moving us clearer, even if we didn't elect to do it. So many people are from the real estate sector here, and in my conversations, something noteworthy came out, which was, yes, balance sheet, yes, location, but real estate is about relationships. Do you agree? And what do you think that means?
So it's the one industry where competitors, do work together. And so why do competitors work together? Because it's such a capital-intensive business. And, I see some members from Tridel there, and they're working with, RioCan. And, competitor of ours is First Capital REIT, but we do mezzanine lending or some mezzanine lending alongside First Capital because it's such a capital-intensive business. So relationships 100% matter. And the way we think about the relationships is we say, once we've done one deal, because the first deal is the hardest to do, how do we do recurring deals? And so, for example, we have some partners on the retail or industrial side. We have 7 or 8 deals with. We have a residential partner we have 4 deals with. And how do we do multiple? One of the things we've been doing is we've also realized that breaking up out of these relationships, it's expensive, right? And it's difficult. And we've been trying to say to ourselves, well, how do we think about this slightly differently? And one of the things we've been doing recently is we have a development in Vancouver. And instead of raising capital or finding a partner initially, what we've said is we're working with a group and we essentially dating. And we're dating for 2 years. We go through the zoning process together. And at the end of 2 years, we're going to see if we still like each other. And if we like each other, Niall's going to tell me we're good to go ahead. And we're going to form that partnership. And you may say, well, that sounds crazy because that's other people aren't doing that. And the reason we're doing it is, I'll use very round numbers. If the land's 100 million and the total development's $1 billion, we're going to invest $900 million more together. And we have to make sure that we work well together, we're compatible, and we both bring skill sets to the table that work well for the partnership. So 100% I agree, relationships are important.
Relationships are important. I joined you 2 years ago, and we started to evolve this purpose statement of ours from creating enduring value to focus on creating enduring value so that people have a place to thrive. And sticking people in was really important. Maybe that is related to relationships. Maybe you could tell us the evolution. I came right at the cusp of that.
Yeah, look, the evolution actually was, we actually did an investor day. And when we said enduring value, we weren't only speaking about financial value, but most investors perceived it as only financial value. So we realized that, we have to change our purpose statement. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, it's a pretty simple thing. We're not successful if we don't have people on our properties. If we don't have people on a retail center, Loblaw or whoever the tenant is not successful. And, our leasing team can't get higher rents. So by bringing people to our properties, it's what makes us successful, what makes, many of our centers the heart of the community that they operate in. So that is why we changed the purpose statement.
720 properties. And across the nation, if you think about it, more and more people are coming to necessity-based retail. They're looking at their retail centers as neighborhood hubs. Do you think that there's a trend in Canadian real estate generally? Do you think retail is going to remain stable?
Look, I think this is the number one question we get about from investors all the time. They want to understand what is the underlying operating fundamentals of every single asset class we operate in. And, necessity-based retail, we think is, very unlikely to be, long-term disrupted from e-commerce. People want to go to the grocery store. If you think of a typical necessity-based retail center, we have the grocery store, we have a pharmacy, we have a gym, we have a dentist, a doctor, so it's true necessity where people want to go multiple times of the week. And one of the things that Orit, you've been helping us with is how do we even truly make that part of the community, where we do some placemaking at it to further draw people in. Also from an e-commerce point of view, much of the deliveries, of the online deliveries, are actually coming out of that box or that grocery box. So I think if you think back through the last few years, if you think back through COVID, or you think back through, e-commerce penetration, necessity-based retail has always been exceptionally stable, and we expect it to continue to be stable. Industrial's been a phenomenal investment in Canada. Historically, we haven't been able to keep up with the pace of demand, and therefore rents have risen, a lot. But again, long term, we don't believe that, given the greenbelt in Toronto and given, many of the other, natural boundaries, we don't believe that the supply will be able to keep up with demand. And therefore, we believe it's a great long-term investment. Finally, on purpose-built rental, there is no more stable asset class than an apartment building. You just think what can, disrupt or dislocate it. Very, very little can disrupt it from a change.
Even with immigration now kind of tapering off?
Orit, I think it comes down to, on all the real estate, it comes down to if you own good real estate in the right areas, you will always do well. You may have, periods of time where you have a bit more vacancy, and periods of time where you have slightly higher rent growth. But if you own the right real estate in the right markets, in the right areas, you'll always do well.
Okay, so you told us about your early days, starting out at Deloitte, working the day before Christmas. I'll bet you it was also Christmas. And so now you're sitting in the seat of the CEO. And I wonder if you could look back. Would you give an emerging leader any advice that, they might not find out in a Forbes article or on LinkedIn?
So I think the number one piece of advice that I would give is work for someone who truly cares about your growth and where you want to go. And, I'm looking at Tony was my first manager, and I remember saying to him that, hey, I don't want to be in audit. Like, imagine telling your audit partner you don't want to be in audit. And so that's the way I've always thought about it. If you work for people who care about helping you get to where you want to go, it's the most important that any of you can do. It's not as important, especially in the earlier parts of your career, what you do. It's more important who you work for. And just two simple examples. Angelica used to work for me as my EA, and Angelica shared with me she wants to be in marketing. And Angelica today, how many years later, 8 years later, Angelica runs our marketing team. And, a similar example would be we had an individual in our organization probably around 10 years ago who wanted to be in property management. And I thought she'd be great in property management, but her boss didn't want to let her go. It was inconvenient for him to let her go. and she'll end up leaving our organization, and because she's going to pursue, what she was passionate about. So to me, work for people who want you to help, who you can see actually want to help you get to where you want to go.
Even if where you want to go is across the street, even if it runs counter to the company that we work for.
But, look, when I say we're not in, look, I understand certain industries, if you go to the competitor going across the street, it's hyper competitive, but if you are honest with your manager and say, this is where I want to go in my career, obviously we want to try and help you get there first within our firms. But if we cannot help you get there, you're going to leave anyway. So we might as well help you get to where you're going to go elsewhere in your career.
When you're meeting candidates, either they're going to be in your team or your direct reports team, what do you look for?
I look for, I assume by the time they've got to me, they're smart. So I look for, just humility, even temperedness, a drive that they want to do this. Those would be the key characteristics I look.
And does it pan out? What are the telltale signs that things are going well? Can you?
Or it's going well with you. You've been here 2 years. If that's what you're asking, that's what you're trying to ask. You're doing fine.
Yeah, there's so many of us that transition from across industries and wonder whether there's a secret sauce, especially in real estate, because from the outside, looks like everybody knows one another. And what I've been fascinated by is how many people at Choice are actually coming from different professions.
I think what it is it's actually a really small industry, and it's big in assets, but small in people. Even you think of Choice has, almost $17 billion of assets, and we have, call it 300 people. So right. You just think of, the relationship of people to assets. And so I think that is why it's a very small industry. And it is specialized, and therefore, like, again, I'm looking at Pete Brown just because I can see him, but Pete would know his peers, he would know, all of his tenants, so it's a small industry, and then people generally move around.
I don't think that I could avoid asking you about tariffs. That's all we're talking about. What are investors asking?
So the truth is, look, no one knows what's going to happen. And even today, I don't know if any of you saw, we were all on this month pause, and then 2 days ago, Trump said, or maybe it was yesterday, Trump said March 4th, they're coming in. And then apparently today, he made reference to April 2nd. So, and then the White House was trying to clarify, no, maybe it was at March 4th. So I think, firstly, no one knows. When we think about tariffs and what's the impact to our business, firstly, neighborhood shopping centers are exceptionally stable, and we see very little impact to our tenants from tariffs. Where we will maybe have a bigger impact is on our industrial business, because, some of our tenants do manufacture, and their clients, maybe in the US. And therefore, if there are tariffs on those products, they may lose sales, and it could have an impact on the viability of their business. But again, it comes back to, if you own great real estate, long-term, you will be fine. And then again, from a Choice point of view, industrial is a very small piece of our business. It's 20% of our business, and then Loblaw would be 30% of that. So, probably only 15% of the true overall earnings would be from third-party tenants. So we think it's a small impact overall to us. But I think overall it could, depending on what happens, it could have a bigger impact on the Canadian economy. But hopefully we have strong leadership who will get us through this. And then, sorry, one other thing I would say, Canada's an amazing place. We have smart people. We have great resources. And I think, long-term, I have lots of confidence in the country.
So you talk about good real estate, which means that there have been good deals. But can you talk about a deal that maybe almost wasn't?
So I would say, in 2019, we had one U.S. retail property, and I think it was on our books for $80 million US. And we always go to a broker and get an opinion of value. Fancy if there are any brokers in here, and the broker told us it's worth between, $80 and $90 million. And I think we got a bid, and I believe we only got one bid, and I think it was at 72 or 73 or 74 million. I don't remember the exact number. And the first thing people do in real estate is like, oof, I'm not selling that below my book value, and why am I giving this asset away? And we just thought to ourselves, look, this is our only US property. It's not like we have a deep platform to manage this property. It's not like we have the greatest insights into what's going on in this asset because, again, it was a single asset we own. So we bit the bullet. We ended up selling that asset, although we almost never sold the asset. And they closed, I think, in February of 2020, and the first month they never collected any rent from their tenants because of COVID. And I'm not saying we were smart to read, but I think it taught us that if you have a strategic reason to do something and sell something, you should move off it. Same thing, if you have a strategic reason to do something and buy something and, economics make sense, we should move forward.
When we were talking about this event and you had asked, why do people want to listen to me? And I had to just pull teeth. Let's get on with it. But you brought up a good point. And maybe it's because there's a curiosity about how these particularly large real estate firms, how they make decisions. And maybe there's some insight in speaking with the CEO. Being in your seat, was there something that you didn't expect being CEO that you discovered once you started getting comfortable?
It's a little lonely at times. That's what I.
What do you mean?
So if I have a problem or a challenge, like sometimes it's lonely. Who do you speak to? That's the only thing. And I don't want to give specific examples, but look, we are very fortunate. We've built a great business with, great team members. You sit in the weekly meetings of mine, and we have open conversations about the business. But I would say, ultimately, when people are looking at you and say, well, what do we want to do? At the end of the day, it's a little lonely saying, this is what we should do. And no one tells you, hey, it's going to be a little lonely.
Right.
But otherwise, I got great people around me, so I cannot complain.
What would you say your top responsibilities are? I could probably guess, and a lot of it has to do with people, but do you perceive?
For sure, people. But look, I think it's, at the end of the day, we are owned by shareholders, and our shareholders want a return. We've put out our returns publicly, what those returns are, and we have to meet those returns. People, obviously, as you mentioned, and then any other strategic initiatives? If it's, the climate change we focused on, it's how do we deliver on what we said we were going to deliver on?
Yeah, you couldn't do that as an auditor, yeah?
What you say?
You couldn't do that as an auditor.
Oh, we could do it as an auditor. Deloitte Swart said we could do it.
I think we're set. Richard, are you ready to go? I'd like to. I on behalf of this audience, I just want to thank you, Rael. We wanted to talk about choice properties, and we wanted to kind of see it through the eyes of one person. Hence, this idea of a fireside chat. You talked about some colossal failures, if I may, early on, switching careers, talking about the long game. And I think that gives people insight about how Choice makes its decisions, if I may. It also gives us insight into how to lead a decent life. And I am particularly grateful for that. So please join me in thanking Rael for your insight today.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. And thank you. We got line here. Okay, here we go. Yes, we're going to take some questions. I think you can see that the QR code is back up. So please submit them, and I will try to pick ones, especially if there were a few that came in earlier that may have already been addressed. So I'll try to be a little bit selective here, if that's okay.
Of course.
But the first one that came in, I think you kind of spoke to this, but there were a couple of questions related to it. Which asset class are you most bullish about, and why? And there was also a question earlier about mixed use and your entry into that space. So maybe you could speak to that.
So look, I don't want to say we bullish. We are bullish on all of our asset classes, but they deliver us different things. The retail delivers us far more stability. The industrial, I'm talking the commercial at the moment. So the retail delivers us far more stability. So for example, we would expect to deliver, stable, cash NOI growth of, call it 1.5% to 2% a year. And it's exceptionally stable given Loblaw for us represents roughly 65% of those earnings or that cash flow. The industrial side, we would expect to, last year we delivered close to 4% growth, and we would expect it to be closer to 3% growth. So, definitely a little more volatile, but higher growth than the retail. The purpose-built rental, look, it's small at the moment. We've built 7 operating assets. We have long-term aspirations to build more. It just takes many, many years to build up a portfolio of good quality real estate. And look, there are lots of developers in the room here. I can see people from Tridel, Daniels, etc. But from the time we think about an asset to the time it's built is 5 to 7 years. So we're not under construction on anything, but as I said earlier, we hope to be under construction soon.
Great. And there's quite a few asset class related. So I'll try to get a few of those in. And then there's a lot more that are back to your sort of leadership style and sort of more personality related questions. So I'll try to break them up a little bit. And they are coming in fast and furious. I'm almost like stop, but keep them coming. How about geography within Canada? There's that maybe a lot of people are talking about Alberta. Do you have picks? Do you have favorites? Do you have, I know that in our PwC, we have the authors of this report here, the report from last November. Calgary was very much on the top of everybody's list, followed by Toronto and Vancouver. What's your sense of?
Look, you have to say what drives commercial real estate. So what drives commercial real estate is obviously population growth and then job growth. And those are the two most important things that drive, long-term real estate success. And at the moment, the best job growth in the country is probably in Alberta. And, Alberta has had strong population growth. But with all the immigration coming, the majority of immigrants still come to Toronto. So long-term, we're very bullish on Toronto too. But we have a huge competitive advantage in that we work with our major tenant being Loblaw. And for example, at the moment, we are building or potentially building them, 6 new grocery stores. And of those 6 new grocery stores, I believe 3 are in Alberta and 2 are in Ontario, or 3 are in Ontario, 3 are in Alberta.
Right. Okay. Very good. How about someone's asked, you've had a strong balance sheet in a turbulent economic atmosphere. Is there a philosophy behind maybe that's the question that
Look, I spoke about it a bit earlier, and it comes out of it really comes out thinking out of the financial crisis. There was a great report done by a group called Green Street, which is a U.S. research firm. Green Street said that if you compare returns of public real estate entities with good balance sheets, or I'll call it low leverage and high leverage, it's a little counterintuitive because let me back up. When you take on leverage, your equity returns are amplified. So you would think groups with higher leverage have higher returns over a long period of time. So Green Street did this research, and they showed that actually groups with lower leverage continuously outperformed and over a long period of time. And the reason they outperformed over a long period of time was because in periods of distress, what ends up happening is those with bad balance sheets are very focused on fixing their bad balance sheets, or they're forced to go sell great assets, or they cannot take advantage of market opportunities. So investors, in particular the US investors, really favor groups with lower leverage. So that's where the philosophy comes from. And so that's what we've done. We've tried to ensure that, we are capitalized to a point that the balance sheet never gets in the way of us running the business. And it's two things, as I said, it's low leverage, and then it's making sure that it's balanced debt maturities over time.
A question on sustainability, and I think there was maybe another one as well. What can you add in terms of the type of developments being pushed out that you're advancing, the types of uses and their role in their local communities? Are they encouraging healthy lifestyles? Was the other add-on question.
Look, maybe I'll start, and then Orit, I'd love you to. Yeah. From an environmental sustainability point of view, our team has developed a development sustainability framework where we're trying to build all of our asset classes to a certain level of sustainability. And Orit, maybe you can speak to the social side of things.
So the benefit or the privilege of having over 500 retail sites embedded inside communities is that we can actually help to bring communities together. I grew up in a suburb, and we hung out in malls. That was our community center. So here we are. We have people that are coming daily, weekly, year-round to grab eggs or to get their milk. Is it possible to possibly add value to those neighborhoods by looking at those retail centers as neighborhood hubs? And if it is, and it might not, it's worth a try. And it doesn't take that much. I mean, the most expensive part of placemaking is the cost of the land. We own the land. So really what it takes is strategy.
Great. There's a question about tell us about the deal that almost didn't happen. But let me add an added twist to this. We are having an event, Confessions of a City Builder, is coming up in a few weeks. And it's asking our speakers that we'll be inviting to speak to things that maybe didn't go quite the way they wanted it. A lesson learned, something that they look back, they might have said, I wish I'd done it differently, but because of it, you came out strong. You became a better leader. You became a stronger company. Anything that comes to mind in that? Tough one.
That's a tough.
It's a really tough one. Okay, come back to it.
I'll come back to it.
Good fun.
All right, let's see. How do you show up for your communities and for your employees? Are there moments that you're particularly proud? So I guess it's the first question.
Look, I think for our employees, as I said earlier, we are particularly proud of the culture we've built. And it's really, how do we create an environment where people are open with us, and I say us as a senior management team, and they feel truly comfortable being, themselves in that environment and expressing, whatever questions they have or opinions that they have. And I would say that's the thing we're probably the most proud of, as I said earlier. From a community point of view, I would say Choice has really been on this journey of placemaking over the last few years. We brought Orit on 2 years ago to help us on this journey. And, 2024 was a big year for us, that we did multiple, events that try to bring the community together. So maybe you could share what we did in the Golden Mile region.
Absolutely. Well, Golden Mile sits in a really vibrant part of the city in Scarborough, and we are developing a site there that's going to bring us into the community for many generations. And The way that you make friends is by introducing yourselves. It's not by making big announcements. It's by opening your doors and hopefully being able to co-design a future together. So that's what we did. We took up a part of the parking lot. We created a space and invited about 14 organizations who would have had their kind of taekwondo programs in the back of a church. And we said, why don't you just bring it here? And other people are probably going to wander and want to join. We had Julie Black come. She's on tour now, but she also does hip hop aerobics. And we had it free and open to the public. And people came, and some of them said, this is probably for a film shoot, right? This is probably not for us. But our marketing was all about being proud. We call this a Scarborough Proud event. And then the word proud was translated into all the languages of Scarborough. And the number of people that brought their kids and kind of pointed to their language, I think was testament to the fact that they saw themselves in the community, and hopefully they were able to see themselves at Golden Mile.
That's very interesting, and I absolutely know what you're talking about. That branding is as stuff. All right, couple personal questions. How rigid is your daily routine, and what would surprise us about your daily routine, if anything? So, what's your day look like? How do you as a CEO do what you do?
You want to know my workday routine?
I didn't ask the question, but I'm relaying it.
Look, one thing is I'm a terrible sleeper, so I'm up exceptionally early, and as you can see by my physique, trying to work out more in the morning. But honestly, I would say the surprise at work is it's just nonstop back-to-back meetings and trying to find more capacity for open space, to think or meet people is definitely something we're trying to find time to do.
Let me wrap up on one last question that is asked, I think, at every fireside chat. And it's really, there's a number of people who are mid-career, but there's also a number of people here who are very early in their career. And as you're looking out, in today, you were the young you, the 18-year-old you, let's say, or early 20s you, and you're looking at a real estate career right now. What sort of advice might you leave us with as maybe the final question?
Look, I think it's what I said earlier. I think it's pick a great organization like Choice. Pick a great organization with a great team leader, and definitely go and try and spend as much time around your leader or as around your peers as possible. I know it's a lot more convenient to work, at home or in a coffee shop, but I think as much as you can learn from people around you, you will completely benefit.
Excellent. Listen, I want to thank you both, Orit and Rael, for doing this right from the get-go, from the first email that I'm glad they didn't fully read. That's great. You've been a pleasure to work with. You brought such an incredible room here of people. I want to thank our sponsors, Aaron Bareilles, Crozier, Daniels, Harini Pontarini, Architects, and NAC Design Strategies, and of course, our presenting sponsor, Deloitte. They're all here because of you, and we're grateful, and that was a really, really nice conversation. So thank you very much.